Hello there, and welcome to Better Than This. This is a show for ambitious humans who are tired of the status quo playbook and are looking for something better. My name is Meghan French Dunbar, and I've spent the last decade exploring what it would take to improve work for everyone, to discover whether or not it's possible to succeed in business without being forced to sacrifice ourselves, without the chronic stress, the burnout, guilt, overwhelm, the anxiety. Good news, it is. As an author, entrepreneur, journalist, and resident instigator, I've interviewed over 1,000 extraordinary business leaders who've achieved success by throwing the old playbook out the window and doing everything differently. What's even better is that this new playbook improves your performance, your workplace, and your life. If you're ready to admit that the way we're working isn't working and are looking for something better than this, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, wonderful human. Welcome to Better Than This. Today we're going to talk about one of my very favorite topics, building a career that you actually love. Is it possible to do work that you absolutely enjoy, that brings you to life, that sparks that fire inside of you, get paid well, and actually enjoy your life? Yes, I propose that it is. I've seen people do it. I've built a career myself that I would say follows along these lines. And there are practices that I actually think can help anyone along their journey build a career that you love. So we're going to start today with a story, not my own for once. This is from Alison Bailey Vercruysse. She is the founder and former CEO of 18 Rabbits Granola, and she's a creator and wonderful human. This is her story of her career unfolding.
At 7 years old, I would go in my closet. I would sit down with large, huge butcher paper and design dresses, design life-size dresses. So from a very young age, I wanted to be a fashion designer. And so I looked at, like, as a teenager, all these fashion magazines, and my grandmother, who was my dad's mom, would say, "Oh, you're never going to make any money doing that. Like, why even bother? Like, why are you looking at those? You're wasting your time." And so, after being told that year after year after year, you kind of think, oh, okay, I guess that's not worth anything. And so I dismissed it. And then food, like, I was really passionate about. That's from a very early age. I went in the kitchen and helped my mom. And I don't know if it's a product of the decade that I grew up in or whatever, but I never saw that as becoming a career when I was growing up. So when it came to college, I wanted to do like philosophy or art history. Well, that was completely squashed because I had to do business. I was told by my father, you must study business and you must go to school in Texas. At least the first year you go to school.
Like, I won't pay for your school if you don't, or just like,
yes.
Okay.
Yes. I ended up going to school and majoring in business. I went to TCU and SMU. And then I swore I wouldn't go into banking, but I ended up going into banking. And I worked at a bank holding company, and I was in mergers and acquisitions. And so then from there, I went to the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. So that was a great experience, and that lasted 5 years. And then I decided, you know what, I'm way too creative for this atmosphere. I don't know who I am or what I'm meant to be here doing, but it's not this. And even though it's a good career, I think that's also when I separated from my dad's idea of success and then embraced my own idea of success. I no longer thought that it was about money, but it was more about fulfillment and what drove me, because I realized if I stayed in the banking atmosphere that I would die. Like, I would get sick and I would get bored with life, and I couldn't exist like that. And that's just how my soul kind of is. There's just more that I meant to do in life than I could do there. And it was different what I'm supposed to do. And one day I couldn't stand it anymore. And I went home to my husband and I said, this is just not working. This is not my passion. It's not what I meant to do. And he said, well, then let's go pack up your stuff and give him your notice. So I did. Yeah. I used my degrees to be a consultant and make a decent salary so that I just worked 20 hours a week. And then I also started yoga, and I went to the beach and I learned how to meditate and painted, but then I also met some designers who wanted me to do paintings for them for the different kind of interior design. I took a food writing class with UC Berkeley Extension, and I couldn't stop talking about food. I was so obsessed with food. I was like, wow, I finally found this internal fire within myself. I was really passionate about it. And so I turned to the instructor and I said, hey, what do you recommend? And she said, go get an apprenticeship. I went to Citizen Cake. It was Elizabeth Faulkner's place on Grove Street, and begged for an internship. And at first they were like, oh, we see people like you all the time. Like, what can you do that no one, why should we pick you? And I was just like, give me a shot. So they did. Somehow I begged my way in there. And I mean, they threw everything at me they could. I had to crack like 500 eggs and then also do them into yolks and whites. And then I had to juice a bunch of orange juices, and all this stuff I was doing with a huge smile on my face. And I was so happy being there that they were just like, oh my gosh, she's not going away. They taught me how to do the pastries, the granola, the bread, everything. So I did that for 6 months. And then I asked Elizabeth Faulkner, what do you recommend? And she said, well, why don't you work at a catering company? So she recommended Taste Catering. So I went over there and I learned from people that had 10 to 12 years of pastry experience, but I was on the same team as they were. No one knew anything about my background or where I came from. I was literally, just came in cold. So that's where I got the kind of commercial experience to do more production. So do like 200 cakes in a couple hours sort of thing. And then I said, okay, it's time for me to start my own business.
What are the very best things that came out of your 18 Rabbits journey?
One that we've been talking about right now is really to honor what I'm here to do. To know that knowing what I am here to do, that is a huge gift in and of itself. And every day I feel like I have a way to express that, to express my gift and be in that joy.
So maybe like Alison, you found yourself in one of these kind of should careers. Stable, it's what you have been told you're supposed to do. It's a practical career, pays well enough. And, we're not supposed to love our work, right? That's the story that we've been told. Maybe it's parental pressure, financial pressure, societal pressure, whatever it might be. You've found yourself in a role that you're not particularly happy in. Either it doesn't really light you up, all the way to it's actively making you miserable. And what I have seen from many people who I know, who I've spoken to, is that a lot of people get stuck. You've climbed the ladder and you've put in all this time and energy building this career that you don't really love. But the idea of changing it is, it's probably, it's too late at this point. So there's a lot of different excuses that we give about why we can't leave the role that we're in or the career that we're in or even the industry and start over again, which is something about Alison's story that just blew me away, was she had made it, at a young age, to the upper echelons in the banking community. She had this prestigious career. She's doing all this incredibly fancy work, and she just walked away from it all and started from scratch. And yes, this is 100% an extreme example of what it takes to build a career that you love. But I started with this story for a reason, because I think Alison's story illustrates a lot of the kind of societal narrative that we have that can keep us trapped in things that we don't love. One being judgment. She had all of this parental expectation from her father, and there was this concern that if she left her role, she was going to disappoint him or let him down. She was worried about leaving, what her boss was going to think. There's a lot of just worry about what other people are going to think about your career decision. Another element is just fear of change. In one of the first interviews that I did for the magazine that I used to run way back in the day in 2015, I was talking to Paul Saginaw. He's one of the co-founders of Zingerman's Deli and Zingerman's franchise in Michigan. And he said a quote that I will never forget. He said, when it comes to change, people either hate change or they really fucking hate change. And it has stuck with me throughout my entire career because it is true, whether it is trying to incorporate some sort of change in the workplace to like some sort of workplace policy, people are oftentimes resistant, all the way to leaving your career and jumping off the deep end and taking a leap and trying something new. It's really hard to change, especially as we get older. In addition to being concerned about external judgment from people and fear of change, there's also this concept of kind of a linear path of a progression of your career that you entry level and then you get promoted and associate, mid-level manager, all the way up until the top. And that you have to stay on the linear path at the same level or above at every step in your career. And this keeps so many people trapped. You make it all the way up to like a VP level and you don't like what you're doing, but in order to do anything new, you feel like you have to start all over again, all the way down, quote, at the bottom. And so you convince yourself that you can't step off the linear path because you've made it so far up the ladder. So a lot of these stories and narratives come into play when we're thinking about changing our work or changing our career to make ourselves happier. And they keep us stuck in roles that we don't like. And when you think about your work, for most of us, it's where we spend the majority of our waking hours of our day for our adult life. We spend so much time and energy. It's a primary source of stress. It's also a primary source of where we can get purpose and joy in life. It depends on the type of work that you do. It impacts your life in untold ways. And it's one of the most important decisions that you're ever going to make. I will also 100% acknowledge that sometimes there's financial situations that you can't just up and change your work. Fortunately, the practices that we're going to talk about today, all three of them, you can incorporate into the work that you're already doing. So you don't have to just stand up and quit tomorrow in order to build something that you love. It's possible to slowly kind of turn the dial up on some of these practices in your current work and see if you could ever get to a point where it feels good enough. And you can also follow in Alison's footsteps and completely change what you're doing. Quit your banking job, go explore art and cooking and find something that absolutely lights you up and build a career around that as well. There's a broad spectrum of opportunities here that you can tap into to actually begin cultivating and nurturing a career and work that you love. So to get that started, practice number 1 is, in fact, following your passion, following what you love, following that spark, that thing that lights you up, just following it and seeing what would happen or what the possibilities would be when you think about something that you really, really love to do. Is there any way that you could get paid to do it? It's just a fantastic exercise. And to lead us through it, we're actually going to talk to Jane Werwand. She's the co-founder of Dermalogica Skincare.
For me, it's a really simple grid. And it's 4 questions. First, what do you love to do? And I mean really love to do. Really love to do. And I don't really care what that is. If you say it's having sex, okay, well, put it down. I mean, you know, we'll work it in somehow. Maybe get on OnlyFans. I don't know. So what do you love to do? In other words, what speaks to your soul? What do you really love to do? And you might say, well, it's petting dogs, or it's being outdoors, or it's, you know, organizing people's closets. I don't care what it is. Put it down. Nobody's going to read this but you. Secondly, what are you good at? Because those are 2 different things. If you say, well, I really love to organize closets, but I'm actually crap at it, well, then that's not going to work. But write down, what are you good at? And it doesn't matter if they don't seem to intersect. What do you love? What are you good at? Third thing, do people need it? Because we have to assume that what we're trying to find is something that will pay the rent. All right. So it doesn't necessarily going to buy you a Mercedes or whatever, but you have to live on it. Unless you say, I'm deeply religious, I love being alone, and you can join a nunnery or a monastery, then you don't have to worry about being paid. So that's okay, because if that's what you're meant to do, you're going to be really happy. So what do you love? What are you good at? Is there a demand for it? Let's put it that way. Is there a demand for it? And 4, can you get paid for it? Can you earn a living? So if you say, so let's just take this thread. Okay, I love the ocean. Number 1. Number 2, I'm a really great sailor. Good. Number 3, is there a demand for people who sail? Well, I suppose if I was fishing, or maybe I run a sail company or a boat company. Okay, can you get paid for it? Ooh. Well, if I work for someone as a fisherman, or maybe if I work on a cruise ship, wonder if I would, so you start down the path. It doesn't matter how random those 4 is. So then you think of these as circles. And what you want to do is you want the 4 circles to somehow overlap. So if you are good at it and you love it, you may have a great hobby, but it might not be a career. If there's no demand for it, no one will pay you. If that intersection means you've got a hobby. If you love it and you can get paid for it, that's great, but is there a demand for it? So in other words, you might love it and you can get paid for it if somebody wants it, but actually you say, well, I don't think actually anybody wants my macaroon dog biscuits. So need those 2 to intersect. Then can you get paid for it, and is there a demand for it? That's the sweet spot, because if there is, and all 4 of those in the middle of that, you've found your purpose. So what are you good at? What do you love to do? What can you get paid for? And is there a demand for it? And if you can find as many of those that intersect in the middle, it's a bit like a hunt, but in the middle is your sweet spot, and that's your purpose. So you have to figure out, and you're smart enough, brave enough, bright enough. You got, 12 waking hours a day that you're not eating or having sex or asleep. Hopefully you can figure it out. And you might have to go somewhere to do it. You might have to travel. You might have to go to a different country. But if you can do it in any way, if it's humanly possible, that's what you should be pursuing, in my opinion. Otherwise, you end up doing something that you're good at, that you get paid for, that there's a demand for, but you don't love it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you just got a job.
You can follow your passion and things that you love and attempt to build a career getting paid to do what you love, like Jane talked about. You can also follow your passion and your heart in terms of what it means to take your next best step. And when I talk about this, I mean following your passion instead of your should. And to help bring this to life, I'll talk about my story when I decided about graduate school. So I was working at the Environmental Defense Fund, and I had fallen in love with their corporate partnerships program. EDF worked with companies like McDonald's and KKR and Walmart to help them become more sustainable. And I fell in love with the idea of the marriage of business and sustainability. How can we incentivize businesses to actually act responsibly and be more sustainable? And I wanted to study this in graduate school. I was looking at doing an MBA program. And in my brain, my little high achiever brain, I was like, must attend top 10 MBA program. So I'm looking, at the Harvards and the Oxfords and the Booths and the Berkeleys and all the things. And at the same time, I'd found this teeny tiny niche program in San Francisco called Presidio Graduate School. And at the time, it was the only MBA program in the country where I could study an entirely holistic, sustainable MBA. An MBA in sustainable management. All of my sustainability heroes had either founded or were teaching at this tiny graduate school, but nobody had ever heard of it, right? Or my other option is to try to get into one of the top 10 MBA programs and then also do a master's degree in environmental policy, which is what a lot of sustainability people were doing at the time. This option would mean that I'd have to do an additional year to get my additional master's degree. And I'd have to be making the connections between the environmental studies stuff and my MBA program on my own. They weren't taught together. Whereas at Presidio, every single class was taught through the lens of sustainability. They were already providing a curriculum that brought the two together and was exactly what I wanted. But my ego was like, I have to go top 10. My heart, my passion, like what actually lit me up was Presidio. And I actually, for one of the first times in my life, listened to my passion. What lit me up, what I actually felt inspired to do. And I went to this teeny tiny little school and I loved it. It was fantastic. I got such a great education. I met peers who were total business wonks like me, but who really were inspired and cared about sustainability and who are now leading sustainability at some of the biggest companies in the world. It was the best choice that I could make for myself and was a great example of me following my passion and what I love instead of what I felt like I should do, the practical, societal choice. I offer this story and Jane's approach as ways to help you move through all of the societal judgment and concerns that you have about what you should do, what your next decision might be about your career. What would your next best step be if you were letting what you love, what lights you up, what inspires you, what you're passionate about lead the way, instead of letting external voices dictate your choice? I feel like as I was growing up, I kind of had this idea that like there was an exact right script of how my career was going to unfold. And my career has unfolded in the strangest possible ways that I ever could have imagined. It was not linear at all. It was this gorgeous progression of me following what I was passionate about and being brave enough to leave roles when I wasn't passionate about things anymore or felt like I was in a toxic workplace and take the next best step based on what I was inspired by instead of what I should do. And every single one of these steps just turns into a stepping stone that gets you to some place that you probably never would have imagined in a million years, but it's the right place for you. When you're thinking about your next step or a big decision in your own career, what would it look like to follow what inspires you, to follow what lights you up, what you're passionate about, what you love? That's practice number one. Practice number two is tapping into having a higher purpose or more meaning in your work. 70% of workers at this point tie their purpose in life to their work. So if you don't have much purpose beyond your salary or your title or revenue goals, it can start to feel really shallow. It's a lot of the reason why people can be at the highest echelons of their career and still feel like something is missing or like they're not fulfilled, is because they're not doing something that they care about. They don't feel like they have meaning in their work. To bring this to life, we're going to listen to a story from Gayle Jennings-O'Byrne.
I'd had an undergrad professor who wrote, he might have even founded the magazine Mergers and Acquisitions. And I just loved his class and him. And after grad school, I went to Wall Street and went into mergers and acquisitions because of that experience I had as an undergrad. And I stayed at JP Morgan almost 2 decades, first as a mergers and acquisitions investment banker, and then as an international lobbyist. And I was an international lobbyist during the Bush administration. And then I was in JP Morgan's foundation and got to see impact and social enterprises and not-for-profits and such. So I had seen the flow of capital from my early days in Silicon Valley with innovation and tech startups. I'd seen the flow of capital in the bigger scheme of the financial markets and Wall Street. And then I'd seen it from a policy and a geopolitical position, monetary fiscal policy, and negotiating trade agreements with other countries. And then I'd seen it from the social impact space. And in all of these, I didn't see enough of the allocation or the flow of capital to underrepresented communities, to my sisterhood. And so after surviving cancer, or in the midst of trying to and hoping I was going to survive cancer, I made a pact with a higher being, and that if I got a second chance, if I got off that, operating table, that I would live a life with more purpose. I was kind of in that beautiful, no judgment wheel of corporate success, and yet I had other values and passions, and I wasn't being intentional about them. So I made that pack. And so, yeah, I got off the operating table. I've been cancer-free since. And so I walked away from a company that I loved and a job that I was doing, to sort of join the front lines with women and underrepresented entrepreneurs. And that's was the birth of what is now Walk Star Capital, which stands for Women of Color Stars.
Of course, in Gayla's story, it took a pretty significant wake-up call for her to leave this corporate role that she had worked so hard to get to. That was a good job, but it wasn't what brought her a sense of genuine meaning. It wasn't the purpose that she absolutely wanted to pursue with her life. But she did. She left. She'd made a huge change, took a huge leap. Of course, it was a risk, started her own organization, and is now living her purpose every single day. And what we find with people like Gayla, who actually tap into their purpose and meaning, research shows that when people have a deep and profound sense of purpose, it leads to increased sense of happiness, greater life longevity, better sleep, and better mental and physical health. It also decreases stress and improves cognitive function. Feeling like you have a sense of purpose is a huge, huge benefit to every single element of your life, but it's also a key component to doing work that you love. It's one of our 3 primary intrinsic motivators as humans, is feeling like we have a sense of meaning. And again, you don't have to quit your job and go start the organization of your dreams, but you also, you could definitely do that. Like, call me if you want to, because I will 100% talk you into it. You can also tap into your purpose in your current role. What are the problems and issues that you really, really care about? What are the ways that you could engage with them on a regular basis, maybe even outside of your work? Or are there ways to bring your own work together with causes and issues that you care about? Is there a way to volunteer your time and talent to organizations that are already working on this? Or, as whatever your expertise is in your profession, can you find a purpose-driven company that's doing work that is fantastic for the world that you could bring your talent to? Working for a purpose-driven organization, volunteering, doing tiny little acts on a weekly or monthly basis that just bring more purpose into your life and help you engage on problems that you really care about and bring more meaning is also a way to tap into further purpose in your career without having to change everything and quit tomorrow. Practice number 3 is prioritizing your quality of life over extrinsic validation, like title, status, awards, salary, all of the external validation that we get that makes us feel like we're successful, but that actually doesn't make us truly happy. So when I'm talking about quality of life, I'm talking about Harvard's Human Flourishing program. They identified the 5 key elements that lead to human flourishing. They are deep, profound social connections, having purpose and meaning, see practice 2, mental and physical well-being, feeling joy and life satisfaction, and feeling like you're aligned with your values and your character. So the practices that we've talked about today, when we talk about having greater purpose, this aligns with one of the key elements of human flourishing. When we talk about doing what we love and our passion, that aligns with having joy and increased life satisfaction. So that's 2 out of the 5. And then when it comes to the other three, mental and physical well-being, deep social connections, and feeling like you're aligned with your character and your values, that's where we talk about quality of life. So many of us fall into the trap of sacrificing time with the people that we love, sacrificing our mental health, sacrificing our physical health in order to make more money or have the next promotion or take on more responsibility or have the fancy title. We sacrifice the actual things that make us happiest, that actually lead to true human flourishing in the name of our career. So last year I was talking to a friend of mine, and she had just left her role. She had been CEO of a pretty big name organization. And I was talking to her about all the reasons that she left. And a lot of them came down to how stressed and overwhelmed she was. She was like, I was constantly on the road. I have 3 young kids and I felt like I was missing their life. I had so much financial pressure on me from the board. I just felt like I was never enough. I could never turn off my work. I was just constantly working at nights and weekends. My mental health was suffering. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, kind of constantly felt like I was right on the precipice of burnout. I had no time for my physical health. I wasn't exercising. Everything was about my work. And at a certain point, I realized that I just needed to take a step away. And I was like, okay, so let's talk about what's next. What are you looking for? And she said, I'm looking for a CEO role at a bigger organization. And I was like, well, friend, um, you just talked to me about how this role that you had, one of the main reasons you're leaving is because it made it so you couldn't have time with your family and friends. It was deteriorating your mental and physical well-being, and you were kind of miserable. So why do you think that you need another CEO role at a bigger organization? She was like, well, that's the next step. If I don't take a CEO role, or if I take a CEO role at a smaller organization, people will think that I've taken a step down. And I was like, oh, no. We can't do this. We can't do this. What would it look like in this moment if you prioritized your well-being and your quality of life, the things that truly matter to you, over the extrinsic validation of your title and your salary and size and scale of the organization you're running? How does that change your decision making? And she was like, well, if I was prioritizing my quality of life, I think I would just try to be a consultant and work for myself. And I was like, I think that's the answer. Title and the status and all the societal garbage that makes us feel like we have to do something that's bigger and better and that is going to impress more people. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. What truly matters is doing work that you love and having time with the people that you love and treating yourself well and being healthy. When you get to the end of your days, those are going to be the things that you are so happy that you prioritized. When we look at the top 5 regrets of dying, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to be and do what I actually wanted to do. And another one is I wish I'd kept in touch with my friends. I wish I'd had more time with the people that I loved. You do not have to wait until you are on your deathbed in order to make those decisions. You can make them now. What does it look like to prioritize quality of life and what you actually need to truly flourish over all the extrinsic validation? Instead of gunning for that next promotion and that next title, maybe you're asking your employer if you can work 4 days a week or have shortened work days so that you can get off at 3 and go be with your kids or your friends or your family. Maybe your next decision is about what would decrease my stress instead of what increases my salary. These are all questions that all of us can ask ourselves. And when you do, it puts things in an entirely new perspective that can change the way that you're making decisions about your career and the way in which you're choosing to work. All 3 of these elements can kind of get out of balance. You can pursue something that you absolutely love, that lights you up, but has no purpose, and you're absolutely have zero quality of life because you're a total workaholic, but you're so passionate about it that you just love doing it, and so you keep doing it, but you sacrifice your well-being in your relationships. You can also have purpose and meaning and do the exact same thing. I see a lot of social entrepreneurs and people who feel like they're doing deeply meaningful work who completely sacrifice themselves because they care so much about the thing that they're working on. Or you can also be doing work that has meaning and that's good for the world, but that you're not passionate about, that you're like, I don't really enjoy doing this. This doesn't light me up anymore. Maybe it once did, but now it doesn't. You can change. Your purpose can change, your passion can change, the quality of life elements, all of those, when you continue to kind of tap into all 3 and see if you can just turn the dial up on all 3 of them consistently, that's where the magic happens. What you choose to do with your work and your career is one of the more consequential decisions that you make in your life. So look at it critically. Instead of just being about money and title and awards and climbing the ladder and the linear path, what does it look like to optimize for what brings you to life, inspires you, and that you're passionate about, that brings you purpose and meaning, and optimizes your quality of life? Dialing those 3 little dials up as much as possible not only helps you build a career that you love, but it helps you build an entire life that you love. Hopefully it means you get to the end of your days feeling that this was a life well lived and that you're thrilled with the choices that you made in your career. I hope that helps. Until next time. Thanks again for listening to Better Than This. As a reminder, you can always find show notes and any corresponding resources for the show on the show's website at meghanfrenchdunbar.com/betterthanthis. And if today's episode resonated with you, I would be very grateful if you could leave a review or a rating on whichever podcast platform you're listening to the show on, or share the episode with a friend who you think would appreciate it. You can also subscribe to my Stack for weekly insights and tools to support your growth along the way. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo so we can, wait for it, build something better than this. Take care.